Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's edition of Wild Wednesday webinar. I'm your host, Paul Kiewiet. I'm the Executive Director of MIPA. And on behalf of the participating regionals, I'd like to welcome you today. Wild Wednesday webinars are brought to you by TISPA, OPA, MIPA, PPA Chicago, PPA Wisconsin, UMAP, PPA Midwest, the Arizona Promotional Products Association, and we're welcoming two new sponsoring regionals, RMR PPA and the Promotional Marketing Association of Northern California. So welcome everyone. Today's webinar is worth one CAS credit. As you leave the webinar at the end of the meeting today, you'll be directed to a survey. If you fill that out and you know your PIN number, I will submit that to PPA to make sure that you've got credit for it. There is a chat box on the left-hand side of your screen where you can enter questions. However, I'm going to be doing much of this seminar direct from my laptop, and I won't be able to see those, so I may not answer them until the very end. Also in that chat box at the left-hand side, you'll notice that you can download a copy of this webinar as well as a copy of a PDF that I've created that has lots of information about the different generations that you may find useful. I'd like to have you mark your calendars for next month's edition. It's going to be early because of the holidays. On Wednesday, December 14, we're hosting Tim Andrews, the President and CEO of ASI, who's going to give us a look into the future. He'll talk about the trends and the hot ideas and some of the input he's received from visionaries at the recent Power Summit. Should be a great webinar. That's on December 14 at the same time. Also, we've got an exciting lineup for you in 2017. How to sell uniform programs, some thought leaders like Charity Gibson, Bill Petrie, Cliff Quicksell, Ann Stone, Kirby Hasseman, Tim Brown, going to be talking about how to market to millennials, Twitter for dummies, product safety, how to sell food programs. So a great, exciting lineup, so stay tuned. At this point, it's usually when I introduce our speaker, and so I've got that awkward situation of introducing myself. As I mentioned, I'm Paul Kiewiet. I'm an industry speaker and consultant and writer. I'm also the executive director of MIPA. I had my own sales promotion agency / distributorship for many years. I started it back in '82. Had the great honor of working with some really major brands and doing some great brand building. Served as the chairman of PPAI in 2007. Was inducted into their Hall of Fame in 2015. I'm going to be covering a lot of ground, so I will be moving very quickly today through this presentation, and I am going to be risking using some technology that I usually don't, including sharing my desktop. So let's see how this goes, and I always have a backup plan. he claimed. So hopefully you're looking at my, whoa, not my inbox. Looking at my presentation now. How to sell to any generation of buyers. You know, we're in a unique situation where there's 4, possibly even 5 generations now in the workforce. And throughout this presentation, I'll be using some dates. You'll see that they vary sometimes from expert to expert. It's really not an exact science. However, we're all shaped by the years that we were born and some critical moments in our lives, and we all share some various influences on us. So today, here's my objective. I want to identify those generational influences for you so you can recognize them in your buyers. A lot easier than asking them how old they are. Each one has a preferred method of contact, how to engage each, and how to build relationships with each. Whenever I give this presentation, there tends to be a lot of interest, particularly in millennials, and so I've also made it geared around a little more emphasis on the millennials. Each generation has different attitudes, and you can identify this quickly when you think of your teenage years. If as a teenager you rebelled and challenged authority, or if you respected your parents, or you felt family and friends were more important than family, or if you counted on your parents for advice and guidance. And of course, the answers to those questions are us baby boomers. We were the rebellious generation, and we felt that challenging authority and rebellious was what teenagers did. The generation before us, the silent generation, very much into respect for parents and a totally different relationship with parents than, for example, millennials, who would be that last bullet point there. They count on their parents for advice and guidance. And an interesting aside, which I'll talk about a little bit later, their parents also depend on them for guidance and advice. And Gen Xers, for reasons we'll explain in a bit, found that friends were oftentimes more important than family. A subset of the greatest generation are the traditionalists, the silent generation. You'll sometimes hear those terms used interchangeably. The generation that's still in the workforce, we like to refer to as the silent generation. Generally, they were born between 1925 and 1945. They still make up 3% of the workforce, or they did as of last year. So that number will be going down. Tend to be age 71 and over. If you call on them, you'll notice that they're very much into hierarchies and structure, and they're a team player. They were born into and accepted as the norm, a nuclear family. They like to be approached with a phone call or even a letter. Their numbers are 40 million, and their household income averages around $40,000. The man pictured there, the Berkshire Hathaway genius and billionaire, is a part of that generation, also known as matures. So their defining idea is duty. They feel very responsible. When it comes to money, they put it away and pay cash. They save up, buy a new car, and immediately start saving for their next car, so that when the other one dies, they can pay cash for it. For them, technology was made up of slide rules and rotary phones. This generation has seen massive changes from the time they were growing up to the present time. Television was a big technology breakthrough for them. It's 9 o'clock. Where do you find a mature or a silent generation? They're at home. They grew up with the music of Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. And for them, work was an inevitable obligation. It's just everybody has to work, so you may as well just do it and shut up. For them, education was but a dream. For them, their defining moments were made up of some things that really had a major effect on them. My mother and father would have been of the greatest generation, actually a little bit before the silence, but very much defined by the Great Depression. They had a frugality about them that was because of the Great Depression. My mother sewed up the holes in socks. There was no such thing as disposable for my parents. The Great Depression had a great effect on them. There was the New Deal. And of course, everybody of that generation knows exactly where they were, what they were doing when they heard about the news of Pearl Harbor. Very much affected by World War II, and then the world changed with the advent of the atomic bomb. And then along came the GI Bill and an opportunity for a college education. But it was a lot of war, World War II, followed by the Korean War, followed by the Cold War. When you want to engage them, you need to be very respectful. Introduce yourself, show them respect, ask for and play by their rules. Some are not very technology savvy and much prefer being interacted with in some ways that you might be considered old-fashioned. Others may be quite tech savvy and prefer to be approached by that way. For them, emphasize quality. Kind of goes back to that Great Depression and so on. They respect and put a value on quality. Using testimonials, staying in touch is important. This is one group where you can make that phone call and say, I'm just calling to touch base, or I just wanted to call and see how you're doing and if there's anything I can do for you. They'll respond to that, where some of the other generations, not so much. Important thing is deliver. If you tell them you're going to do something, make sure that you do it. And be aware that you have to make it easy for them. All the way through the order process to delivery, make sure that you're making it easy and show that you're dedicated to them. Since they're only 3%, I'm going to move right on. Which generation is the median buyer of Harley Davidsons? Which one was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year? For which generation is the career goal of building a stellar career most important? And which one prefers work feedback once a year with lots of documentation? Of course, I'm talking about baby boomers. I should have prefaced this presentation with, I'm going to try to offend every single generation, and I can get away with it with baby boomers in particular because I are one. Baby boomers, boy, did we think we were something. And so did the rest of the world. They pretty much kowtowed to us and allowed us to make a huge effect, both for good and bad. There's a little video about the baby boomers. Ah, yes, the baby boomers. We were spoiled, and we did have the world by the tail, and we don't like to be thinking of ourselves as old. Baby boomers still make up 31% of the workforce, but as you may guess, we're retiring every day. And by 2020, that number is supposed to be down to 22%. Currently, baby boomers are aged between 52 and 70. Self-absorbed, yes. Disintegrating family, yeah, we're to blame for that. We brought around the sexual revolution and a lot of other revolutions along with it, and also made divorce common. The baby boomers really responsible for the disintegration of the nuclear family in our society. However, to our benefit, we are hardworking, we're goal-oriented, we're very comfortable in hierarchies. For us, we like that personal touch. Give me a call. Give me a call. Get in touch with me. Big numbers. Boomers were called that for a reason. That post-war bubble of GIs coming home from the war, getting married, having kids, and there was a population explosion. 80 million baby boomers still alive. And look at that average household income, nearly $60,000, the highest the world had seen. Baby boomers have some billionaires that, like Bill Gates, who are part of our generation. Our defining idea was individuality. We really wanted to, quote unquote, do our own thing. And when it came to money, we're always going to be making more. I'll be talking about a little bit about our optimism, but part of that was, hey, I can buy that now because I can pay for it later. And baby boomers really invented credit card debt and a comfort of living um, on the edge of just putting it on a charge card and paying for it later, enjoying it now, living um, really with some instant gratification. For us, technology came along, calculators, that rotary phone replaced by a touch tone phone, and wow, that magic of put the paper in over here and they see the image over there, the fax machine. 9 o'clock, where do you find a boomer? Well, we're workaholics. You'll probably still find the boomer in the office. We had the best music. I think I can say that. Every boomer says that. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones. We really created some great rock and roll. We find work an exciting adventure, which is why we're still at the office and why we are workaholics. We really like to go for it. Um, However, since the GI Bill came along, we discovered education and pretty much felt it was a birthright. Boomers pretty much felt like, okay, you go to high school. If you want, you go to college. Our defining moments were the Cold War. The image you see on the screen is something that, as a boomer, I remember. Uh, in the event of an atomic bomb, we were supposed to hide under our desks. But we lived in that fear of the atomic age, of a hot war with Russia that would mean nuclear warfare. We also lived through a series of really horrible events. Where my parents' generation can tell us about coming out of church and learning about Pearl Harbor being bombed. I remember in fifth grade, Mr. Ehlers coming into the room and telling us we're being released early. The buses are showing up at the front. President Kennedy has been shot. I remember the fear and the riots as Martin Luther King um, Jr. was assassinated. And then RFK leaving the hotel in Los Angeles and saying, on to Chicago. And then that pictures, the image of him lifeless and lying on the floor of that hotel and his assassination. And of course, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We created it, we invented it, we perfected it, and Woodstock was the rallying cry around that. We had the riots at the '68 Democratic Convention, the pill, the sexual revolution, Roe v. Wade, Watergate. All of these things help define boomers. When you're selling to a boomer, remember, they're optimistic. They're expecting great results. This is a group to lead with the brand names. When you're coming in and putting together a proposal, go ahead and name drop. Use those brand names that are available to us in the industry. These are a great lead-in, and while they may not end up paying that extra for the name brands, they're going to recognize it, they're going to appreciate it, they're going to want it. Make sure it's very personal. Sell person to person, relate to people on a first name basis and get to know them, and show that you're customizing and personalizing things for boomers. Again, I'm a boomer. Back when I had an office, I had an I Love Me wall with every plaque and honor and magazine article and anything was on there. Look for that in a boomer's office and uncomment on it, because they go into, they really get into that. And most of us also have had some sales training. We respect sales training. Go ahead and sell. They're going to recognize it. Oh, you're using the old Ben Franklin clothes on me. They may actually identify some of the techniques you're using, but go ahead and be a professional salesperson when you're dealing with a boomer. But most of all, show them that you're working hard for them. Let them know the amount of time that you put into putting that proposal together or the extra effort. Go ahead and tell them and show them that you've done that. We like to be courted. My good friend Joe Scott has a presentation about how selling is like dating. And when it comes to boomers, date them. Make that initial contact. Take them out to lunch or for breakfast or for coffee. Get to know them on a step-by-step basis. Really get that courtship going. Look for those signs of accomplishment that I mentioned. Find out what their comfort level is with technology. Many boomers are very comfortable with technology. Others still aren't on Facebook. A lot of them still have Hotmail and AOL addresses. So there's a wide variety of comfort level with technology with them. Excuse me. Yes, we've been spoiled, and yes, we have egos appeal to it. Make them feel visionary. When you put together your proposal, if you can pick up anything that they said during your fact-finding portion and work that into it, even if you've come up with the idea, if there's a way to make them feel like it was their idea, or you picked up on some of the things, pieces that they gave them, give them the credit for coming up with the idea. Make your idea their idea, and you'll certainly have a sale. You need only to look around. You'll find some of our old childhood candies are on the market now. We're very much into nostalgia. Also, be respectful of their children. This is not a group to be critical of the younger generation, because those are their kids or their grandkids. And they have a very special relationship with their children that needs a lot of respect. If you start, it's never a good idea to be negative, but if you start getting negative about the younger generation with them, you may hit a sore spot. So, which generation is the sales-proof generation? Which one's most likely to view salespeople as desperate and dishonest? This generation is the average home buyer today, and it's the first American generation to be less well off than their parents. This generation has the founders of Dell, Google, and Yahoo in their numbers. I'm talking about Gen X. Gen X, the cynical generation, catching up with the baby boomers in the workplace. 21% of the workforce in 2015. By 2020, they will be equal to or greater than the baby boomers in the workforce, which is only interesting because it was a pretty small generation, only 60 million of them. They're currently from 35 to 51 years old. Probably a lot of Gen Xers on this call, I would imagine. Very entrepreneurial. This is the first generation that really created that name, latchkey kids. Thanks to the boomers messing things up and messing marriage up, good chance many were raised in broken homes where mom had to go to work. They split their time between households, and was basically, here's a key, stick it in the backpack, and when you get done with school, come home, let yourself in, make yourself some soup or a snack, watch TV, play with your friends. There became an independence for this generation that had not been seen before. And somehow through all of that, they started viewing the mistakes of the baby boomers and that workaholic thing and thought, yeah, this ain't for me. And we can thank Gen Xers for coming up with that phrase, work-life balance, because this is a generation that really created it, and they crave it. They're also very skeptical of authority, mainly because of us hypocritical baby boomers who were telling them one thing and doing another. As far as communication, this is a generation that does use email and responds to it. If you notice, the boomers had a household income of $60,000. Gen Xers right around 49.5, just around 50,000. Jeff Bezos, great example of a Gen Xer billionaire. Defining idea, diversity. They saw around them that the world was changing and became very accepting of a diverse world around them. Unlike the boomers who spend, and buy and spend and then earn it. This generation is much more cautious about money, very much into saving, very much into knowing what their budget is and living by a budget. Something us boomers just can't understand. But technology Lotus 123. Along came spreadsheets, followed by Excel, the cell phones, and personal computers. It's 9 o'clock. Where are they? Gen Xers at 9 o'clock, they're going to be home with their family. It's going to be important for them to be putting their children to bed, telling their children a bedtime story. Very much that work-life balance coming into play with this generation. For music, they grew up with the music of Madonna, Nirvana. For them, work more of a difficult challenge. It gets in the way of that whole balance thing. It's like, I'd rather be doing other things, but I've got to work, so I'll get there. And they tell me I need a college education. It's a way to get there. I'll go ahead and do that. Gen Xers, their defining moments, here's where some of the cynicism comes into play. Very much defined by the baby boomer pop culture and all of the stuff the boomers were getting all the credit for and attention for. And then they saw their government, the president lie to them with the Watergate scandal. They saw the greatest economy on earth get runaway inflation. During their growing years and important influential years, they saw a prime interest rate of 16% of runaway inflation in the United States. And then the embarrassment of the United States having hostages taken by some little Middle Eastern country, Iran, and the embarrassment of that, of us sending helicopters in to rescue them, and the helicopters blowing the sand into their engines and ending up with a failed rescue attempt. To mention their latchkey kids when they came home, and lo and behold, MTV came along, and music videos, and cable TV with lots of different opportunities to view lots of different programming. And then again, another disappointment. If you ask a baby boomer or a silent what they think of when you say the word NASA, they're going to tell you that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. You ask a Gen Xer, what do you think of when you think of NASA? And the image of that space shuttle exploding over the blue skies in Florida on that day with a teacher come to mind. We even messed up sending the first teacher into space. We even messed up a space launch for this generation. And then along came a disease with no cure, AIDS. And then we had a president selling arms in exchange for those hostages with the Iran-Contra affair. And then the Persian War, Gulf War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, that great high-speed chase in the O.J. Simpson trial that followed. World Wide Web came along, VCR, CDPG. All of these things helped define who Xers were. So when you're selling to Xers, here's the thing. Be brief and to the point. They tend to be more all business. They're used to being lied to. So if you're just making conversation for the sake of making conversation, they may view that a bit cynically. Be brief and let them know what you're there for. When you are selling, make sure that you list all the available options, everything. Don't leave anything out. Gen Xers, one of the things that they sometimes say is they stalk their purchases. They've probably done some research ahead of time. If you're leaving something out, there's a chance they may catch you on that, and they may view that as being less than authentic. Authenticity is important. Back up your claims. If you have some research, present that research and the source of that research. Referrals are golden, especially if they're from their peers. Make sure that you're offering solutions. Again, selling solutions, things that have immediate application, something they can use right away. In developing that relationship, make sure you're valuing their time. They value time over money, so make sure you're honoring that. Make sure you're offering a full range of options and always have a plan B ready. You'll see it in their eyes if they're not buying what you're selling. You'll see it immediately if you're not on track. So it's a good idea to have a plan B ready when you're coming in for a presentation to Xers. Whenever possible, involve them in the process. Ask for their input. It's a good group to, particularly, to be doing that fact finding ahead of time of making building a proposal a collaborative effort. Use very efficient communication. Don't use a lot of fluff. Don't pad presentations with unnecessary information. Be efficient. This is a great group for educating them on our industry, our products and services. This is a good one where the transparency starts. Xers are going to appreciate an invitation to an end buyer show, for instance. It shows them that openness and transparency and lets them know that this is how our industry works, and they'll respect it. They can respect our channel of distribution as long as it's explained to them. So which generation? Over 40% have a tattoo. 20% have more than one. This generation was going to feel guilty about littering or not recycling a can, but they'll illegally download videos for free without a flinch. Over 90% use text messaging and social media daily. More than 25% have a pierced body part other than an ear. 75% of them will switch suppliers with just one bad experience. And most of them, 85%, are going to tell others about it. Of course, I'm talking about the generation you wanted to hear about, Gen Y, also known as millennials. I love this cartoon because it shows so much about that love of texting. There's couples sitting across the table texting each other about how much they like having breakfast together. You gotta love millennials. Gotta. And here's why. Whoa, that's disturbing. One moment, please. Let's try this one. Nope. Let's try this one. Sorry about that. Gotta love millennials. Love that song. And there's a lot of, I told you that's going to offend every generation, and they're easy to pick on. However, look at this number. They are now the largest group in the workforce. 45% of the workforce last year, 2015, were millennials, and that number continues to grow and grow. That means you are probably selling to a millennial, 45% of them. And when I think of the age group of who my primary buyers were when I was in sales, they would now be millennials. This is a group that's from 22 to 34 years old, and they're incredible. They're the most educated group ever. They're worldly. Unlike Xers who came from broken families, they're more likely from merged families, where they're living with remarried parents, perhaps with stepchildren or step siblings, and so on. Very comfortable with a totally different paradigm than what older generations grew up with. As I say in the song, they've gotten a lot of attention. Um, and that work-life balance thing that Xers introduced, millennials really feel like as long as I'm getting the job done, why do I need that hierarchical structure that the silence and the boomers love so much? They really prefer flexible work structures. Um, Maybe working from home 1 or 2 days a week. If you've been to some of the workplaces built around millennials, you may be surprised that there's like group tables where folks work from. Very different and much a great big change from what previous generations had. They like having direct input on projects, and they're not afraid to make that direct input. They just went to college, racked up a huge amount of debt. They feel they're, that word entitled, but they feel like they've earned the right to contribute immediately. To the horror of particularly boomers in silence, a millennial may come into a meeting with the CEO and president and immediately speak up and start making contributions or even criticisms or challenges to some of the authoritative declarations made by others in the room. They're comfortable with that. They know that they've been educated, and they feel that they're being paid to be there, so they're going to make that contribution. There's really no holding back with this generation. As far as communicating, they like social media. Text me or hit me up on Facebook. I've got two millennials, daughters who are millennials. Oftentimes, as I'm texting back and forth with them, my wife will say, "Why don't you just pick up the phone and call them?" The answer is because they prefer to communicate via text. Big group, 85 million. This is a big generation. And the excuse is haven't been in the workforce long enough to have a average household income. Let's just say they're influencing more than $500 billion worth of purchasing decisions, and they're moving into that prime age where they will be moving out of their parents' basement, buying a home. They are buying cars. They're making the big consumer purchases. So it's obviously a force to be reckoned with, both as consumers, but also as buyers, and also as coworkers, and as part of the workforce. Millennials or Gen Y, Zuckerberg. There he is, a millennial billionaire, one of the richest people on earth. For them, their defining idea is authenticity. Be real, be yourself, be transparent, be who you are, and demonstrate authenticity in everything. With money, they like money, but they're going to earn it and spend it. They're not likely to squirrel it away, but they are not likely to be putting it on a charge card because they already have a huge amount of their income going towards their college debt. But this is the first generation that grew up with a screen in their hands. All access, all the time. They are digital natives. No matter how hard I try, no matter how hard I keep up, I will always be a digital immigrant. I grew up with a record player. I grew up um, in an analog world, and have had to learn digital. Gen Y or millennials, they've always had digital communication devices. When the iPhone came out, it was tested on like 2-year-olds, and then the iPad and so on. Um, this generation grew up with it and extremely comfortable. It's 9 o'clock. Where are they? They're out with their friends. Um, a lot of people look at that texting and the face in the screen thing as being antisocial. However, millennials are extremely social. They keep in touch with their friends, and part of that is through technology. But they also like to go out together, hang out together, go to craft breweries, probably more so than the malls. But um, they're close to their friends. They grew up with the music of Eminem, Lady Gaga, and they view work as a chance to do good. This is something that's really interesting about this generation, but this is a generation who will graduate with a lot of college debt, and be offered a job at Goldman Sachs and turn it down to work for a nonprofit. They really view work as more in terms of gigs as well as in terms of experiences, where they want to do this for a while and then maybe become a mountain guide for a few years, and then maybe come back and be a teacher for a few years. This is a generation that's looking at multiple careers, not just multiple jobs throughout their lifetime. And they view education as just being an incredible expense. And it's true. The inflation and the cost of college has just skyrocketed and has left them, most of them, burdened with a lot of debt by the time they graduate. They've been defined by the prosperity of the 90s. Those wonderful Bill Clinton years with the technology bubble and the technology revolution. They're used to, many of them grew up in McMansions, being driven to school in a BMW. But they're also the first generation who may have been a little bit scared about going to school, starting with Columbine and then almost monthly gun violence in schools around the country. Has had to have a very much shaping effect on them. But here's where things really changed. For millennials, they grew up with their parents as friends, not that harsh authority figure that the silence and even us boomers grew up with, not that distant, remote, you've got to go to work, I'll see you when I get home, honey, that the Gen Xers grew up with. But actually their parents developed a friendship with them, asked them from their opinions on things from a very young age, and then became their coach, organizer, Uber driver, and everything else. They grew up with, it's at 6 a.m. we've got the ice time, and you'll have your skating lesson, and at 4 o'clock you'll take your swimming lesson and your dance lesson and all of that. When you think of the age that they were at, well, all of us were also have that same Pearl Harbor, JFK assassination experience of knowing where we were. We also have that for 9/11, but for this generation, that is that moment in time that they'll always remember where they were. This is a generation that has known nothing except for our nation at war. When you think about our country has been at war pretty much from the time this generation was born, they have known nothing other than our involvement in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. The older ones also were experienced with the whole Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. And then the election of 2000 with the hanging chads and the Florida recount. But they also saw the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, and what that meant, and how that must have had such an impact on their parents and on their households. For many of them, possibly even to the point of losing their homes during the housing crash. And then, of course, social media. They pretty much created social media, starting with MySpace and then shifting over to Facebook, and then all the other ones that they are continuing to be behind in terms of the growth and start of it. So how do you engage these folks? Again, be concise, be upfront, be yourself. This is a generation that grew up with immediate gratification. They've gotten something instantly, pretty much from the time they were born, and on that screen and that social media experience, and offer something for free. And this is great news for us promotional products professionals. Gen Y, millennials, they love, I hate the word, but they love it, swag. They love promotional products. They like receiving it. They like giving it. They like including it in their promotions. And I think it's one of the big reasons why we're one of the fastest growing advertising media, is because millennials understand promotional products. But have your self-promotion thing with you when you call on them. They love receiving something for free, or a chance to earn something for free. If you can add gamification to a promotion and a way for them to earn something for free. Utilizing technology, communicating with them through social media, of having a relevant website that is comparable to the type of experience that they're used to. This is difficult for many of us, particularly the smaller independents. But this generation is used to placing an order, receiving an immediate email confirming the order, receiving an email with tracking information, and being informed all the way through the process of where their order is. Be very open with them. Don't be afraid to be yourself. It goes back to that authenticity. Don't be afraid of being judged by them. They like people of other generations. They're very much into diversity. But importantly, don't be negative. Don't be judging. As they would say, don't be a hater. You may not be comfortable with tattoos and piercings, but don't judge someone on that. It's an expression. It's part of that individuality. If you're a boomer, it's the members only jacket that you had to wear to express your individuality like everybody else. It's body art. It's something that maybe you just don't understand, but don't be a judge of it. Build up their self-esteem. Let them know that they've contributed a great idea. Let them know that you understand, and let them know that you appreciate their opinions and the insight and perspective that they can bring. What you want to be doing, particularly in talking to the older listeners here, is to be that trusted guide to them. Again, remember what I told you about their respect and relationship with their parents? I like to think of it as be that dad, be that work dad to them, or work mom. Be that trusted guide, someone who can say, yeah, you can get that online, but through what I want to do is help you pick the right item, one that's been thoroughly product safety tested, one that's been proven, one that we have reviews and experience with, that's going to make you look good. In other words, help them make good decisions. Decision making has that risk factor, and if you can work into being that trusted guide to them and help them make good decisions and compliment them when they're making those good decisions, that's going to really help you develop loyalty among millennial customers. Manage your reputation. Having a good reputation is important. I like to say today you really need to be thinking about your personal brand. Who is your personal brand? What is your personal brand? What do you stand for? Know what your brand is and build that brand so that when they see you, they're going to see this is the guy who makes me look good to my boss. They're not going to be going, oh, here comes the pen lady, or here comes the mug guy. They're going to say, wow, here's the person who really knows how to put together a promotion. Whenever I work with him, my boss compliments me on the job that I do. Use testimonials. Um, Millennials make very few online purchases without checking the feedback and what other people have to say. So make sure you're using testimonials in your work. If you know, have them on your website, post them on your social media posts. Get into social responsibility. If you can support a cause, that resonates extremely well with them. If you can organize working on a Habitat for Humanity home or organizing a food drive for a food bank. Social responsibility and charitable causes are very important to this particular group. And use their technology. You may not like texting, but if your client wants you to reach them through texting, reach them through texting. If they want you to use Facebook Messenger, use Facebook Messenger. Use the technology that they want. The golden rule has been replaced. It's now the platinum rule. Don't do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. Do unto others the way they want it done to them. And this is critically important with millennials. When it comes to marketing to millennials, I love this cartoon. If millennials ignore traditional advertising, then how else can we annoy the crap out of them with our marketing message? They do not like traditional advertising. Again, I think that's one of the reasons why promotional products is growing faster than traditional advertising, because millennials love us and we are not traditional. Here's a couple of points that I picked up from several books that I've been reading about millennials that I just wanted to share real quickly with you. Millennials hate to feel like they're being marketed to. Again, social media provides conversations. What you're really wanting to do is to be building relationships. A little bit different than that courting that I talked about with baby boomers. This is more about building trust and growing trust. Millennials will say something like, if I like it, I'll help. But if I hate it, I want to tell them why. Be open for negative feedback as well. I think that's why we see so much everywhere, people taking surveys and so on. You can learn from it, from why they're not buying from you. And they're direct enough where you could ask, you didn't buy that last order from me. Could you tell me what I did wrong or why? They feel like they should be rewarded for being smart and doing things well in the marketplace. The old joke about them getting trophies for participating, maybe a bit exaggerated, but they are the most educated generation out there, and they feel like they should be rewarded for that. And kind of step right into the relationship building. They value creating content, and so make sure that you're providing relevant content, things that they want to read or laugh at. That making them look good to their peers is important. One line is, they have a nose for bullshit, and they're complete suckers for genuine passion and transparency. Love what you do and don't be afraid to show it. They'll respond to that. I talked about you building your personal brand. They're already doing that, and they care deeply about their personal brand. So get to understand them and find ways to enhance that relationship. While boomers value exclusiveness, we want that Maserati, or we want that thing that other people can't afford, or that something that millennials value inclusiveness. They like having everybody involved, and they put a value on inclusiveness. People care about what I say, where I am, and what I'm doing. And I think Facebook is a great example of how that lives its way out. Uh, when it comes to price, price is important to millennials. One of the sayings is, if you're not a millennial, you probably paid too much. They know how to shop. They know how to shop online. So make sure your value proposition is something other than just price. They're into swapping and sharing. Abundance is something else. I mentioned that abundance of the 90s. They grew up in a country that spends more on trash bags than 90 other countries spend on everything. And that's how crazy the abundance and material abundance is here in the United States. They grew up with that elevated status of children, of that constant presence of adults growing up versus, as I mentioned, being ignored like Gen Xers. Matter of fact, I saw a statistic that says 8% of millennials actually took their parents to a job interview. I find that hard to believe. I should cite it because there's probably some Gen Xers going, yeah, where'd you get that number? But particularly on the West Coast and companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and so on, where there's a huge number of millennial workers, instead of having a take a child to work day, they have a take a parent to work day. Because they've had that access all the time to everything, I don't know is not an acceptable answer. This is a great group for finding hacks and workarounds. They're very much into active engagement. They like things that are share-worthy. So if you bring in a great idea, even if you bring in something that's really off the wall, they're going to enjoy that because it's something that has a fun factor and it's something that's share-worthy. Also, get a sense of their sense of humor. They're hilarious. And then real quickly, as I close, there is one more generation coming up, Generation Z. Haven't really come up with a name for them. Some are calling them the globals. Others are calling them the gamer generation. They currently only make up about 1% of the workforce. By 2020, it will be 7% of the workforce. This is like millennials on steroids. Also motivated by meaningful work and responsibility, interested in mentorship and constant feedback. They're like multitaskers on steroids. And this slide is in the download that you can have. But this group is 23 million and growing, and at work they're going to be very collaborative and creative, and they're who's coming up next. So I've really come to the end of my time. Now I'm going to switch to back to the other mode. Stop the screen sharing, please. There we go. Oh my God, and there was one with no sound. I hope the sound came through. So if anyone has any questions, they can put them in the chat box. If not, as you leave, fill out the survey with your PIN number, and I'll submit it to PPAI. Make sure that you put down December 14 for our next Wild Wednesday webinar, where we're going to have Tim Andrews talking about what the future holds in store. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next month. Thanks. Bye-bye.